talk about volunteer orientation and training. What's the difference between orientation and training? Orientation is an organizational overview. It provides a big picture, contextual description of your entire organization as well as your volunteer program. And training is job-specific information, the specific instructions that a volunteer needs to complete the task they're going to be performing for you as a volunteer. Orientation is an opportunity for volunteers to get information, again, about your entire organization as well as your volunteer program, and possibly to determine if they're interested either in volunteering at all or in volunteering in other ways beyond what they've committed to for that specific day. It might be an opportunity to collect paperwork if you haven't already received an application or a waiver from the volunteers, and it might be also an opportunity to conduct or schedule an interview if necessary for that volunteer role. Volunteer training happens after orientation. It can happen immediately after orientation, and that's where we provide more detailed information and concrete training for the specific tasks they're going to be performing. Training can be formal as a group training. It could be a 3-hour, it could be a 40-hour training, it could be a 15-minute training, or it can be one-on-one as needed, depending on the role and the volunteer in your program. And for training, you really need those who are going to be supervising the project to contribute the content of the training. Both orientation and training can be very extensive or very brief, but both are critical, and they really are two different components. Every orientation should have 3 key components. First, welcome and introductions. Second, an organizational overview. And third, information about your volunteer opportunities and expectations. In that second section, you might include a video if you have a brief video about your volunteer program, about your organization and your volunteer program. You want to provide background information about the organization, the need, the challenge that the organization was founded to address, maybe some statistics about your community, the mission of your Main Street, some history, and an overview of the services, programs that you provide and the structure of your organization. And then you want to provide a little bit of context, how volunteers have to this point, or how you plan for them to contribute to the bigger picture. And then move into talking about the volunteer opportunities that you have available. You want to present your position descriptions and the commitments associated with each of those volunteer positions. Talk about any volunteer rules and regulations that apply to all volunteers. Collect paperwork, as we mentioned, maybe applications, intake forms, waivers, and then talk about next steps. What's the next thing that needs to happen? Do they need to schedule an interview? Do they need to attend a training? Do they need to just sign up for a shift? Or do they need to just get started after you provide a little bit of training about what they're going to be doing for you? And then, of course, a thank you for being there and expressing interest in volunteering with your organization. The idea is that anyone who attends an orientation, even if they choose not to volunteer with your organization, has more information about the great work that you do in the community and can still be ambassadors for your Main Street program in the community, even if volunteering for them isn't right for them at that point. A few tips. Again, both orientation and training can be formal or informal. How in-depth it is should be informed by the volunteer role itself. Although consider that some volunteers, even those who sign up for perhaps just one shift at an event, might welcome a more in-depth volunteer orientation. To that end, whether the orientation is very brief or very extensive, again, can be informed by the opportunity. You can provide a 5-minute orientation at the beginning of each shift at an event so that all of your volunteers who come up to pour beer also know what Main Street is, why they're there, what they're supporting. Or it can be something that you hold, or it can be something that you hold perhaps on a monthly or quarterly basis for all potential volunteers to come and learn more in depth about the organization as a whole, what Main Street is, and all of the various opportunities available. So those two types of orientations can complement one another. They should, regardless of how brief or how extensive they are, include these three key elements. Welcome and introductions, where you say thank you for being here and expressing interest in learning about our Main Street program, going over an overview of what Main Street is and what your local Main Street is, and an outline of the variety of volunteer opportunities that are available. So what other ways could they choose to volunteer beyond picking up trash on this cleanup day? In this section of the toolkit, you'll find a PowerPoint template for a sample volunteer orientation. So this can be a guide for whatever shape your orientations take. This one will be very in-depth, has a lot of historical and overview information about the National Main Street Initiative and Main Street America, and then has places for you to insert and suggestions for the type of content to insert about your program and then your volunteer program. So certainly make it your own, delete things that you find to be too in-depth, but it's just a guideline, and all that information is there for you to use as you see fit. Also in here are a few resources from Main Street America. There is a volunteer handbook template that's provided by them. Some frequently asked questions about Main Street. Much of that information is included in the PowerPoint template for volunteer orientation, and some suggested contents for a board manual that's also a Main Street America resource.